Board, 10 o'clock, call the Virginia Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee funding quarterly subcommittee meeting to order. We'll start with the roll call. Wheeler.
Okay. From BRA, we have Tom Humlin for Peter Dilemma. So
here.
From the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission, Ben McFarland or Whitney Catmark. Ben's online.
I'm online. Whitney, I believe, is supposed to be there in person.
For the Middle Peninsula, Louis Lawrence and Curtis Smith.
Yeah.
From EDAM, Robbie Coates or Deborah Bentler. That's Robbie. Chamber of Commerce, Keith Martin, Kristen Burhoff or Ethan Betterton. DCR, Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development, Bill Curtis.
Bill just messaged me, he's got to pull into another meeting, but I'm just going to try to.
Okay. VDOT, Chris Swanson, Christopher Bird. VMRC, Claire Gorman.
Good morning.
And from Virginia Sea Grant, Troy Hartley. Here. Morning.
Great. And Matt, we got one other introduction. DCR serves as staff to the subcommittee, and I wanted to introduce you all to our new staff member. Ellie Plisco is a Virginia or BC Wilder Fellow, is joining us from now. She started this week through May and is working to develop a strategy to help us identify how to provide more capacity and support to local governments that are not resourced. It's important to working on that. So you will see Ellie around at our meetings.
Do we have a motion to adopt today's agenda? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Hi.
Moving along, adoption of the subcommittee meeting minutes from the second quarter meeting as posted on the town hall. Do I have a motion to approve or any comments? I'll move. Second. Second. All in favor? Wonderful. Great. Matt?
Thank you, Sean. Welcome, committee members. All right, before we go into the subcommittee meeting, just kind of want to reorient ourselves to what we're working on here. We're charged with as a subcommittee. So first up, Virginia Coastal Resilience Master Plan, Phase 2, which is due out at the end of this calendar year, so just a few months away. What is this plan? It's meant to be a trusted resource to assist government, so state agencies, PDCs, and localities to make better evidence-based decisions to deal with flooding that we face here in coastal Virginia. So two of the key components that it's doing, it provides a unified baseline of analysis, not only of what flooding is happening today and what it impacts, but what flooding could look like into the future and what those future impacts could be. So again, we can make evidence-based decisions for how we want to address this challenge. And it also identifies opportunities to prioritize impactful flood resilience solutions. We're working to collect projects and initiatives and then also share those and report on what's going on. What are the local governments, what are state governments doing, what they want to do to address this problem, to try to identify opportunities for collaboration and also opportunities to learn from others across the region. We're going to be delivering this plan through a PDF document and an online web explorer, and the major elements are of that, the references. Where's the flooding? What are the impacts? What are the needs, both financially, maybe other solutions? Then also your subcommittee recommendations for each moving on, this subcommittee and your recommendations will be focused on our objectives. Oh. Somebody help me. How do I add this? Does it matter? So these funding subcommittee objectives that we worked on about a year ago One, inform the quantification of financial needs for flood resilience. How much money do we need, right? What do we need to implement projects for policy programs, guide preparations? Identify and examine the financial tools and processes that are needed to implement flood resilience. Also identify the challenges and opportunities to implementing these financial tools. So what tools are needed, and then how do you actually use those tools in practice? And then key component, developing recommendations for future planning. And that's really the focus of today's meeting. So here's kind of our schedule that we've been working with. We're in 2024 Q3 meeting. We've got a brief update on the financial impact assessment update, but the bulk of today's time will be spent on our subcommittee recommendations. Any questions, comments on what we've covered so far? All right. So a brief update on the financial impact assessment. Our financial impact assessment is largely leveraging the overall impact assessment process. So this is a quick update. Been working heavily with Dewberry and Stantec on this effort. The assessment and data summary just completed, and we're working on some final data sets and getting those over to Stantec in the past couple of weeks. Stantec's been working on data story. So what does the information tell us? How do we present it in a compelling way in the document in the Web Explorer in order to? So we're working on developing this draft, and then our plan is due at the end of the year. I want to mention one thing about our draft document. We do have some PDC members here. In our second draft, which will be in October, the PDC plan features resilience profiles for each PDC. We'll be coordinating with that section review to make sure it accurately reflects that efforts and check. What does the financial assessment impact look like? Well, one, we're looking at the flood hazard impacts. So similar to phase one, average annualized losses to buildings and structures. Phase one just had coastal. We now have that also for pluvial flooding. So our rainfall driven flooding, we do not have it for the riverine flooding because we just have one return period for the riverine based on our PVD. So we can't take that and try to pull out average annualized loss for multiple return periods. Looking at ecosystem service losses, the sea level rises and some of our lands have potential to transition open water to wetlands, uplands to wetlands, or I guess it'd be wetlands to water. What types of ecosystem services benefits we're providing before, and what does that transition look like in a potential new land use or land cover? We're looking at regional economic impacts for each PDC, trying to get at what are these direct impacts look like kind of rippled out through the rest of the economy in the region. So that's a big addition that we're working on. We're also working on the local real estate tax revenue impacts. We've heard your feedback, and I think it's in some of the recommendations that we're going to discuss. I'm trying to get at like the temporal change of those. We don't have that right now, so it's kind of just looking at future conditions. If we lose these properties to flooding, what is the potential tax base change? We don't have that historical record that we're tracking back, but that is some of the recommendations we discuss. Then we have some contextual information on the local economic capacities and indices, broader scale natural infrastructure, ecosystem baseline benefits, and then a summary of the needs of our projects and initiatives, as well as what's going on. We have a couple additional updates in the financial space that we're working on. The funding database of the Web Explorer is getting updated. So we will have up-to-date funding opportunities, or have the ability now to maintain that moving forward. Largely that's been static since phase one. Then we're also mapping financial focal areas. So if a funding opportunity or a loan opportunity grant, any opportunity comes up and there's a preferential funding criteria for a geographic area, depending on how that's defined. We're working to try to collect all that information and map it and provide it in a single source so we can see if you have a challenge here, where do you have the highest likelihood of success just based on some of the funding criteria. So that'll be part of our financial database as well as our updated web explorer. Any question on the financial impact updates? I don't have any data to share with you because we're just getting it and working on getting it.
Matt, on the local real estate tax, and a lot of the recommendations talk about this being the responsibility to put it back to local government. Was there a reason why you did not push this or did not think to push this to the Department of Tax and the Commissioner of Revenue? So those two entities have the responsibility, not local government.
Yeah, so I think we will talk about the responsible party in the recommendation. So as we get to the recommendation discussion, that was just the starting point, and we can evolve and that can change. So we'll discuss that later today. Any other questions? Anybody online? Wait.
So just, so these are things you're definitely doing?
These are things that are going into the plan.
Because I mean, they overlap a lot with the things I feel like that are on the recommendations.
There are some overlaps, yes.
So anyway, it's just sort of weird of like, how do you prioritize something that's already in the works?
Well, that's for the discussion. Yeah.
All right, I
So
still
things
think
can get done if they're getting done, or you can have a recommendation that it needs to continue and evolve.
Recommendation.
And it also means that we've heard your prior recommendations and are trying to implement it into phase 2. Recommendations. So we worked on this starting in just the last subcommittee. We got around 30 recommendations from each subcommittee, a total of about 120. We're trying to whittle that down to 5 recommendations per subcommittee. And we're looking for the 5 highest priority recommendations. All of the recommendations have been documented and will be included as an appendix to the plan. So those recommendations aren't lost. We don't forget about them and just say we're not doing that. But we want to know what's most important and how do we prioritize those recommendations. The recommendations should be an action that we can accomplish or work towards doing between this next phase. It could also be a process that DCR approves, or there might be other responsible parties that need to be involved to help support these recommendations. Here's kind of the schedule, where we're at with our August Q3 subcommittee recommendations. At the next TAC meeting, which is a month away, every subcommittee will present where they're at. Our next subcommittee meeting, we still have a little bit of time to do any final wordsmithing to come up with what is the final language and vote out up to 5 recommendations that will be presented then to the TAC for a full vote. So we've got a meeting, our next subcommittee meeting, I think it's October 10th for this subcommittee, and then November 13th is our final TAC meeting to vote that out. You all should have calendar invitations already for these meetings. If you don't, let us know and we can work to make sure it's on your calendar. So how are we talking about top recommendations? So how do we prioritize what from this list? We took your initial 30, sent it back to you to try to, through a survey prior to this meeting, what was in your top 10, and then of your top 10, how would you rank them for most important to least important, the top 10? We took that, scored it, and that's how we have the top 10 recommendations that we sent to you earlier this week, and that we'll be discussing today. So we think about prioritization. We want to try to make sure we're working within our subcommittee's objectives, that these recommendations align with the purpose of the Coastal Resilience Master Plan and our planning principles, which are here on the right side of the slide. And then also think about the impact, urgency, and feasibility of the recommendation. We know there's a lot of great ideas, a lot of great things we can do, but we want to hear from you. What should we really be focusing on? What do you think could have the most impact, or what's the greatest need, and what's accomplished in these next few years? Okay. Additional,
This is an order of importance, or you're just looking for a recommendation to check those two boxes?
this is guidance, so this is not requirements, and these are your recommendations. Staff has not edited them by and large. We tried to make some clarifying, but yours have not been edited. We've grouped them where we think they kind of align, but these are your all's recommendations to us. And so you have some freedom to edit and change and think what's most important to you. Really. Additional. We're also working on just starting the flood protection, the Virginia flood protection master plan that's due out next December. That's a statewide effort dealing with flooding across the state. And one of the key outputs from that this plan is a strategy with different what can we do to help with different policies and programs at state agencies across the state. So if something doesn't make it here, or something might be better for the statewide context, there's another kind of bite at the end next year with statewide planning. I think before I get into next, so Louis, you brought up responsible parties, localities were listed as one. There's one that I listed as all, and again, that's something that can be changed to refine today. There's a space for all of us to help out on a lot of these recommendations, but trying to narrow it down to the primary responsible party. So I think that's in station 2 potentially, and we'll work through that. Any questions so far before I hand it over to Linda from Launch, who's going to go over more details about how we're going to work through the stations and what we're trying to do here with recommendations.
And then maybe more of a big picture context comment for a moment. If you look at our principles, right, that there's some socioeconomic inequities and equity issues in general that are part of. And if you would go back 2 slides to the sort of your financial assessment, right? So here, these are good examples of where the next evolution in this master plan compared to the first one, we're taking things like ecosystem values and looking at economic tools to put a quantitative number on that. But as we frame this section up on your in the plan, it kind of probably makes sense to think about it. There's an evolution here. There are other types of values that we're knowing are going to be important in understanding resilience and project scale, and certainly some of the recommendations coming through the research and data innovation side are going to be about how do we measure some of those human dimensions, what the social vulnerability indices, and then that sort of connection between those ultimately measuring those things and how we measure these things. It will be kind of how you frame that up, right, in the report itself, and recognizing that those other measures are coming to the table too. Some of them will be able to be converted into economic measures, some of them not. How do we use them together? So this is a good evolution from where we were the first time, and there'll be another one next time.
That's right. We're doing this every 5 years and Louis?
Is there, or should there be, now we're really getting down to the nuts and bolts here, a recommendation for an executive order from the governor to direct the state agencies that are mentioned that need to do something to report on whether or not they plan to do it?
Is there a need? I think if we get through the recommendations and there are state agencies. Yes, right. How does that implementation of the recommendations, we haven't gotten there. And I know that's a big need. First is kind of where are we at with the recommendation? What do we think we need to do? And then how does that?
Yeah, because obviously what we don't want to do is get to the end of this and everybody celebrates and you cut the ribbon and the balloon goes off, but nothing ever happens. But there needs to be some constructive attention to the mechanism to activate some of this stuff, or at least a directive to consider activating some of it.
I know a lot of the recommendations are focused on our office, and those are things that we can have more influence on what gets done. But yes, where we need other actors to participate, we need that buy-in and support. All right, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Linda from Launch. Turn the lights back on.
Camera. We're gonna have lots of action today. So when it comes to the recommendations, Matt talked a bit about the background for them. We wanted to reiterate, when we're thinking about the recommendations today, you don't have to be too worried about wordsmithing, because we're going to do that by the Q4 meeting. So today's purpose is to take the 10 recommendations, figure out the top 5 or the top 5 where you combine some that you want to move forward. And then after today, we'll be able to give you the list of what you end up with. You'll have some time to think about how to wordsmith, and then by the Q4 meeting, you'll be able to come up with a final list with good words for each of those concepts. So that's a little bit helpful. It kind of makes it go a little quicker. So the other aspect of recommendations is that we will vote once we're done kind of getting involved. We're going to get involved with the online folks and then the people in the room who are part of the subcommittee. When we're all done, if we coalesce them into 5, great. We don't need to do voting. If we have a subset, let's say we have 6 or more, then we will go ahead and do some voting. I've got stickers in the room, and you'll be able to use the chat online, so no worries about that either. So I wanted to start just for a couple minutes. Because we're going to do some creative thinking, I wanted to give you a chance to do the right brain, left brain interaction. And it really helps when you're using both sides of your brain. It helps in a lot of different ways. So we have this fun little exercise. You don't have to get up, and everybody online can participate as well. And what you're able to do, and Wheeler, if you can you show us the people who are online right now?
I guess.
Oh, it's here. Great. What you'll be able to do is slow down the cortisol production, and it actually makes you calmer. So when you're doing this activity, all you have to do is put your hands out in front of you like this. Go ahead, put your hands out in front of you. Then take your right hand and cross it over your left hand. And everybody online should be doing this too. You can watch CC online, we'll show you. Hook your thumbs together and bring your hands up towards your chest. So we call this a butterfly hug, but what you're doing is you're gonna tap alternately right and left side. And the reason why, if you notice, and you just keep breathing with this, if you did this for about a minute, you'll actually feel yourself calm down as well. So it's reducing your cortisol, any anxiousness anybody has. That makes you calm. There you go. And you can use it at any point in time in your life. If you want it, we call this one the butterfly hug. If you want to call it the gorilla thumb, you can make fists and you do the same thing. Just make sure your arms are crossed. So that's the important part, to be able to activate both sides of your brain. Cross some part of your body. So that's our start, our warm up.
And you just recorded this, so everyone online, that's permanently available to.
Yeah, it'll become a meme. So it's okay for the world to know how to do that activity would be a good thing. So what we can do now is start to think about what it is you're going to be doing in these groups. So we've got 3 stations in the room, and online, Cece will be screen sharing, Sydney will be typing from our launch consulting group, and all of the subcommittee members who are online, we've got 2. Okay, so our 2 members online, you will be kind of doing the discussion. What we're going to do here in person, when you go to the station, so there are 7 of you here, and you can choose any station you want to start. We're going to have facilitators at each station. So that will be Matt, be Carolyn, Rebecca and Arthur are going to do one of the stations. And you'll be able to see 4, if you're station 1 or 2, 4 different recommendations. In station 3, there's just 2 there. They may or may not be related to each other. We try to group them where there would be some relation, maybe there's some possibility to combine. And then you have about 10 minutes per station, but you can move at your own leisure. Online, you'll be moving, the two of you, of course, moving together at your own pace with CC facilitating that discussion. When you come up to the station, and these instructions are also written on the back of the sheet that we handed out, and someone is posting or has posted in already, it's already posted there for you online in the chat. If you wanted to grab this one pager, it has the 10 recommendations that came from the survey on the front, and on the back, it says what we're doing at each station, but I'll explain it to you right now. So when you get to the station, you look at that recommendation, let's say it's recommendation 1 over there, happens to be at station 1. They're not going to be in order at each station. The recommendation, when you read it, it'll list a responsible party. If you agree with that responsible party in person, just put a check mark, you've got a marker. And if you think it should be someone different, write it in there, who you were thinking the responsible party should change to. Then you go on and you'll have a section where it says recommendation description. The concept there is that each of you would put at least one bullet to bring that description, that recommendation to life. Because the recommendation, we want it to be just 1 sentence, maybe 2 sentences at most, but maybe there's something more you want to talk about, like what is the real purpose here? You want to explain it more, put it under that recommendation description. That's going to help too when it comes time to doing the report. We'll have more information, not just 1 line on the top 5 from your subcommittee. After that, there's a comment section at the bottom. Each of you online, you have sticky notes. Sorry, each of you in person, you have sticky notes. And on the sticky notes, you have a very pretty marker that will show up well. You can write any comment that you want about that recommendation to put it up there. The difference between recommendation description and comments on sticky notes don't have to do with the exact language of the recommendation or the purpose. It would be like, we could drop this one, or I think this one should be combined with this one. So any kind of comment around it. And in that way, we will be able to get through 10 different recommendations in about 30 minutes. You're welcome to talk to others, because there'll be more than 1 person in a group here. Online, if you're feeling too lonely after a while, for Ben and Claire, let us know, and we can update you in some way with what's going on in the room. But after about 30 minutes, we're going to come back together, online and in person. We will have a facilitated discussion, and we are going to get to your most important 5 recommendations. Anybody have questions about that process or anything at all?
Yeah, question. So as an example, so recommendation for determine what the existing available funding resources are. And if I have a thought that relates to yes, and we want to be more competitive for those funds, right? These are federal dollars, and how do we enhance our state's competitiveness to be successful in gaining those? Is that a comment I would write as a note on there, or is that a comment I would put on a sticky?
So if you're putting it in comments up there, you would write it under sticky and post it up there. But I think you're asking, like, is that a part of a description of it?
Right.
Or is it more of a comment? If you can enhance, I will say it doesn't really matter, as long as it goes up there somewhere, right? That's the most important thing. But if you feel like you want to expand the language of the recommendation itself to include that, I would put it in the description. So, the intent of it would include that piece. Good question. There's a parking lot up here too. So if you come up with something that doesn't have to do with the exact recommendations today, you have some great idea or something you want to make sure we look at, you can put it on your sticky note, put it on the parking lot. And for those who are online, you can put it into chat.
Just another note on responsible parties. For state agencies, we called out our office for things we felt that our office was responsible for. There's other programs in DCR, there's other state agencies. We didn't call out a specific agency. So that's where state agencies still could include DCR. It just may or may not include our office.
All right. So for those of you in the room, feel free to hop up now. facilitators, go to your stations. And I will let you know when about 10 minutes has passed, just to kind of coach towards moving station. If you personally don't get through all of them, that's okay, as long as somebody has looked it off. We're going to come back together and discuss. Yeah. Let me know when we're done.
Not large enough?
You all see that, or does it need to be?
Does it need to be bigger?
We can see it.
So can you hear us?
Yes.
Welcome back in. Some really good discussion. What I did for the online group, for those of you who are online, I was for the most part transferring your comments that Cece was writing onto the wall charts around the room. And so some of those are in there already. I do know that you had some good language for combining 4 and 10. I didn't have a chance to write that down yet, so we'll need to add that when we get to that point.
Okay.
So we've got about 28 minutes to discuss these 10 recommendations. And it seemed as though some of those recommendations you thought you should drop, they were too complex or for different reasons you thought that maybe not take all of them forward. So let's talk about them, starting with number 1, and we'll talk about how the groupings of combining might work. And maybe we can talk about the groups of combining first, and then let's go into a little discussion about the recommendations. So for those of you in the room, Arthur, you want to report out about their first station and some combining?
Sure, so this station has 1, 2, 8, and 9. 1 and 2 speak to pools, 1 financial pool, 2 tracking events relating to flooding, and then 8 and 9 are speaking to tracking data and real estate value. So the first group believed 1, 8, and 9 were important and could potentially mesh together. And then 2 was maybe less important and didn't fit in that mix. In terms of the challenges with 2, adoption and locality capacity was a concern. So in terms of responsible parties for 1, 8, and 9, there was a theme that state agencies could potentially develop tools that would then be leveraged by universities, planning district commissions, and localities. Specifically, localities, Department of Tax, Commission of Revenue could potentially work on providing data sets relating to the tax base to then feed into or leverage the tool to provide some of the tracking relating to revenue slippage due to flooding. One of the challenges that we discussed with that is parsing or delineating between flood impact and other effects of on tax real estate values. So it was identified that in rural waterfront communities, this may be easier to do. For example, just splitting the land and the actual structure value. But there would be subject matter expertise required in other areas, obviously compounding factors such as in a more urban environment where there's a lot going on in terms of real estate value.
So Arthur, can I pause you there?
Yeah.
With the group, and we're thinking about 1 and 2, 8 and 9, that's what was at station 1. So that's the first 2 items that you looked at online, the first 2 sets. What does the group think if you combine 1, 8, and 9? That's what, does everyone in the room feel that that would be appropriate to combine 1, 8, and 9? And does anyone in the room disagree with doing that? 1, 8, and 9, you can see it at the top there.
That really depends on how good the person is structuring all of these complex independent variables into one thing that doesn't lose the impact of it.
Yes. And so the way we'll look at that and talk about that in more detail between now and the next workshop and then also, in the Q4 workshop. However, so the question right now is, would you want to combine 1, 8, and 9? And then the alternate question, because I heard this from those who are online, some of you say you can get rid of one or more of those. So online, for those of you who are virtual, any comments about 1, 8, and 9, combining them or dropping something?
Our virtual conversation revolved around 8 and 9, not really seeming feasible. 9 being more of a research question, but I'll let Ben speak to it if you had any further comment, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I have a lot of concerns with the ability to actually differentiate the impacts of flooding on real estate values compared to the, just everything else that goes into assessing real estate. And so, until there's some sort of proven, demonstrated model for that, I would maybe not get rid of it, but it would be a lower priority for me. But maybe I think that might be a research question for some of the universities out there to be able to demonstrate that they can actually pull that off.
And so one of the things you can think about when you're making these recommendations, the description in them. Let's say the description for 1 included some information about when tools are ready, universities could blah, blah, blah. That could be in the description that goes with another recommendation. So it's not a recommendation by itself anymore. It becomes a thought as part of something else.
I agree with Ben through the lens of how it's more complicated in urban communities, but in these rural communities, real estate tax is the primary majority revenue generator. If we do not shine light on that by looking at different data sets right now, real estate tax records, this issue becomes a regressive tax on the poor. Because if your waterfront values decrease, which they're already doing in many of my rural jurisdictions, those that live inland have to pay more to make up the difference. Local government equalizes. And so in certain localities where you really only have 2 variables, the structural value and the land value, it is a little easier to be able to see what is happening on those parcels that are experiencing a high level of threat. So it is very location oriented. So promoting that, look at your data that you have, there may be a picture in your data. That's important. And that may help it to get to then worry about, well, it's not really important to us. Right. But they're really important to us from our side of the ledger because it is an important indicator of softening impacts on levy. It is just a different issue that we're dealing with in rural and urban.
So looking at the bigger picture of the data, depending upon the region, might be different, but the general language could be about that, right? Okay.
And then,
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, just to be clear, like I think this is incredibly important. I just don't know how feasible it is. And I think I saw Troy in the room and might be the resident academic there. But I wonder if there is, if you've seen anything, in the literature or, in hearing from your different university partners about, how this is being done, if it's being looked at the academic level. I'm familiar, generally with, hedonic pricing and how they try to do that. But, when we've talked about doing something like this in the past, internally, it's really hard to do to kind of just to tease out, the impact of flooding versus the impact of just other market effects. And so, I think absolutely, if it can be done, I think it's critical to know this. But I think.
Ben, I think to that point, sorry to interrupt you. To that point, maybe we can put that on the parking lot. So let's Carolyn, can you make a parking lot sticky, and we will say, evaluate if it's possible to do tracking on the real estate analysis. Does that cover it, Ben? And Robert, go ahead.
I think, well, just to the initial question of combining 1, 8, and 9, I think 1 really is at a high level what we're trying to do is why should we invest in it? And cost of doing nothing will tell you why you should invest in it, right? So I think I think keeping it simple is a good thing, and I think 8 and 9 are as related as they are, kind of, this is how we would do that, but I think 1 is maybe should stay, especially since it was number 1 recommendation. I think you could get bogged down with details, but I think that's the intent.
Great. And Wendy, were you gonna say something too?
I would just say, I don't think that's a parking lot, issue. I just think you might write it as, you know, evaluate the real estate, I guess, the values and look for trends and develop further analysis, you know, by region or by, you know, start with rural and expand to urban, because like, we have a path forward. I mean, I think this is always the hard part. In this case, I mean, Louis saying we think there's something there. So say do that and then look to see if there's something that's relevant to the urban over time.
Great. And so really, you could change the words a little bit, you're thinking? Is that what?
Yeah, we can work on it later. I
Later.
should say, I wouldn't put it in the parking lot. I just leave it.
Leave it here. Okay.
We combine those two and then we work on language later.
Great.
So Linda, if I may, so it sounds like there's an agreement, 1, 8, and 9 are important, but there are challenges to feasibility and research concerns, whereas 2 was feasible currently without these extra considerations, but maybe less.
So is there anyone who disagrees for the concept of how these go forward? If for now we combine 1, 8, and 9, and you can wordsmith those later. So anyone raise your hand if you disagree with combining 1, 8, and 9. Other than that, we'll stop
So
forward.
yeah, that we just said we're doing 8 and 9.
Okay, sorry, 8 and 9 and 1 by itself. Got it. Okay, so 1. Great. So 1 and then 8 and 9.
I'll just have a comment, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with that, I mean, but. I think it was really kind of fascinating to me walking through this discussion. There's a lot of apples and oranges. And, so it needs a little bit of analysis on your part or even the way you set this up in the recommendations, but right, scale was different in a lot of these questions. Some were very specific on a local scale or a project scale, different than a regional, state, or even federal scale. If you look at it from that perspective, you might alter this prioritization list. Likewise, context is really important. Is it rural? Is it urban? Is it low income? Is it rich? All of those things matter and change the prioritization accordingly. So there might be a way that you think about this in a matrix way or a way you count this up. Acknowledge that these priorities will not be the same in these different context areas.
That's a real important statement, right? So, and we're capturing that right now.
Put on the parking lot. I do think ultimately it is the subcommittee's responsibility to recommend at those different scales and those or rural versus urban. How do we decide what's more important? I don't know that we can certainly categorize things in that way, but the prioritization piece is not necessarily something that we would want to do because they're urban.
Okay, so 1, 8, and 9. We're gonna move on. 2. Anything go on with 2 to combine with anything else, or should it stand by itself for now?
Recommendation number 2.
Sorry, recommendation number 2.
So there was concerns about challenges of adoption and locality capacity too.
So does anyone propose either dropping number 2, leaving it by itself, or combining it with another? Either virtual or in the room?
There's another comment was there's a EM resource already.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if you wanted to speak on that a little bit, because I know that was your comment.
Yeah, I mean, we have, VM purchased a contract tool in 2015.
Okay.
And I think all but less than 10 local governments use it, and their tax base, their taxable information is uploaded, so when we do damage, we get dollar estimate for that. So I think it's more about just promoting promoting that more and coordinating. Sharing and availability of that data, but it is something we're looking to use.
So we have a tool in Virginia then to do what number 2 is talking about, right? Does everyone agree on that?
Now, it's only as good as the entries, so like, you know, there's a lot of damage that, like, I'll give you an example, this isn't flood related, but there was a tornado in Caroline County that they're like, that's so minor, we're not gonna put it in there, so. It's just a matter of, you know, the tool's only as good as
Right,
the entry,
the
right?
data, yeah.
Usually it's our EN tool.
Local emergency managers, yeah, but it's well beyond that. We've seen these congressional appropriations that don't run through FEMA or don't end up on your face. We will see these presidential declaration areas, and I'll be looking at this going, three of my jurisdictions getting included, but the one in the middle. And what we can learn through that is there's a secret list of those that can count the states that broke and the window panes that broke and enter that information in and throw you over the threshold. So what's lacking out of this is awareness around all the different people that can actually enter the damage data into the system that cumulatively drive you over that threshold. And that's where we have been advocating for rural local government for every single form. Count every single stick that broke, count every single pine cone that fell down, because every dollar matters. If you don't cross the threshold, you can't get to the money.
So for
I
this,
think
Louis,
this
then,
one's specific to, like, that's, I think, one item, but this is like the ones that don't make it, like, so basically every time we have a disaster in Virginia, we create an event and turn it on, so we'll get the report, so it's just more, I think, about, like you said, promoting that more, bringing awareness to.
so you
What
can,
do you mean by event, or would you do, sorry, like, just. When it's coming from a certain direction, it create. Street.
It's obviously like where there was, we know from our regional offices, there was damage there.
I mean,
and is it okay to table it? Because we only have about 10 minutes right now to be able to finish these. Obviously, that one needs some more discussion on it. So our purpose in the next 10 minutes is just to look at how you would either combine these to 5 or drop some to get to 5. And so moving on from that, we'll leave number 2 by itself for now. And you can decide whether or not you want to change the language for it later. But it sounds like you want to be able to keep it.
on the farm forever or not?
It's not parking lot, it's just where we're at.
Oh, sorry,
It's not even, it's going.
This is how they'll get
Reason for that law.
Yeah.
We're just seeing if the list is gonna come on.
Yeah, so this is the combining list that I have up here as well as on the screen. So moving on to number 3, do we have any other, let me ask in general, actually, do we have any others that could be combined? I know 4 and 10, they were talking about combining with our virtual group. What are your thoughts about either, I think, dropping 4 and 10 or combining 4 and 10? Did you have any thoughts about that? That was at station 2.
We're not dropping anything now, we would go, then that's drop, right?
Unless the group unless there's consensus here to say, yeah, we don't need that, but.
Right,
Yeah.
and for 4 and 10, the virtual group was not suggesting dropping either. A revision was suggested, and that is identify and evaluate existing funding resources and determine whether they sufficiently address short-term and long-term needs.
So that's
And
for
I'll-
4 and 10 together.
That's for 4 and 10 together. Mm-hmm.
So Rebecca might need that again in a second. You got it? Okay. So we looked at combining 4 and 10. Are there any other ones that looked at combining?
I just want to pause there with 4 and 10, because we had, so 4 was very much on evaluating or determining what's available. On 10, there was an evaluation, and I think Kurt, you want to see the evaluation part?
Yeah, I think the more important thing that we can make progress on is money obviously drives everything, and in terms of overall performance of the state meeting its resilience goals, figuring out how the money is being spent and where and if the greatest bang for those bucks is occurring is really important. Because that would have, understanding that would, better equip this TAC to be able to make solid recommendations to the General Assembly. Because at the end of the day, that's gonna be a political discussion of, would they weight, for instance, the flood fund dollars more towards long-term, making that priority of use of flood fund dollars versus the short-term, individual shoreline projects.
Where the state has control over the funding, not only can we put it out, but after it goes out, evaluate how it was spent and then kind of reevaluate, is that what we want to continue to do? So just a little separate from the, kind of, it's a list of what's available.
So to that end, should that remain separate then? 10 versus 4?
I think
4 seems much simpler, and I think we have a better understanding of what the funding resources are. Evaluating it, in my mind, is more impactful. So if you're going to combine them, just make sure that the language behind 10 stands out.
Okay, and Rebecca, do you have that language that you can put there? They have a combined language they suggested.
I just need to hear it.
Okay, so Cece, can you Slack that language to Rebecca and then she can put it in there? Is that a good way?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so 4 and 10, there's some potential combining with. Let's go on to the other ones, Matt, that you have there.
we had 3, which was on economic development potential, essentially flooding is not only a challenge, it's also funny, but there's economic development opportunities, not only where you build, do things, but also economic development opportunities for the products and solutions that are needed. So that stood alone. We do have a note, I'm guessing it came from online, could be jobs are combined with one. I don't think it came up when we mentioned it. We vary on its priority level, some people higher, some people lower. The responsible party was split mainly to the economic development community. But that there was a need for that community to be entered.
Okay. And so 3 and 5 would remain separate at this point. Online, number 5, was there a comment about how you would combine that in with number 1?
No, there was no discussion of combining 5 with 1. 5 was just identified as a lower priority.
So, thank you.
So we got 3 by itself, 7 by itself, 4, and part of it tend to go over to 4 when we're determining what's available, look at both long-term, short-term. The evaluation part of that is focused.
Okay, so 4, if you combine 4 and 10 and kept the evaluation part in there, is that something to suggest here, or do you want to keep 4 and 10 separate? Anyone have comment about that?
Okay, 4, we're looking at all funding sources. At 10, we're evaluating just our state funding sources, because that's what we do. We're not trying to evaluate how the feds are spending great money and then try to tell them.
There's a division between, every time you talk about funding, you have to say grant money or loan money. Because each of those 2 vehicles put you on totally different financial structures. You can't lump.
Okay, so 4 and 10 stay separate?
I think there's 2 separate concepts.
Yeah. I mean, I was fine when I was over there talking about putting 7 and 4 together, but 7 is the one about making the case to state legislators, and I just think some of the sort of requests for analysis are the kind of information you would use to make a case, but I don't feel strongly about combining them.
7 and 10 are more closely related because at the end of the day, 10 would lead to a recommendation to the General Assembly. So.
So I have a question for you guys are 2 audit scholars, right? So number 4, determine the existing available funding and resources are, as a recommendation for this group. there's something we're not already doing. That is, you guys are know, we kind of know we're going after money. I mean, what's the recommendation that? Above and beyond what we're doing already, maybe the frequency is due or updating the available data. What is it, what is board giving you that you haven't already got?
It's not, we're missing the political will. And if there's no political will, determining what money is available makes no difference. If your community, if you have no one in your community that's willing to sign the application and sign the grant agreement, you produce all the list you want.
So let's leave those, yeah, let's leave those separate then for now. And that's the way we could do it. If there's not a general consensus that you want to put them together, let's leave them separate, that's fine. So we have two more to mention. And that would be
Number 5, number 6. You know, it's a big, it's something that's not really being done right now. It's a lot of work for in. One conversation revolved around, you know, what does intergovernmental or in-regional mean? I think this would need some work today, but essentially, I think there was agreement if it moves forward that the role for the resilience planning would be to kind of explain what these different governance tools and funding sources are and how they can apply to the coast resilience master plan, what we're trying to do in terms of flood protection, and kind of set up the tools and information and technical systems to allow them to be brought to fruition, but ultimately using them would come down to those, you know, projects under projects. So this would be more, I think we would end up changing the wording somewhat from identify opportunities to kind of explain and educate, develop resources around, connect it to the coast resilience process. I think the online group was saying this is going to be really hard, lower priority. It's interesting, but not top priority. Is that fair, CC?
I'm gonna disagree with that. I think those communities that already will need these complex financial tools, that 5 are PhD level financial tools. I mean, those are products that are available that communities, we use most of those every single day under the Fight the Flood program. So for us, those are extremely important tools in our financial toolbox. And so it really gets back to the level of readiness that your community has to either do something actively about the problem or not.
Okay.
So it's like, again,
So we'll leave 5 and 6 independent?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have any discussion with folks about really combining these two. I think we agreed 6 was a lot more general. That there was some discussion about the differences between private and public, and I think Whitney suggested that they really needed to be identified and separately.
Okay. So what we're gonna do now then, so we've got about 10 minutes until public comment period comes. We have just one pair, one combination with 8 and 9 together. So Rebecca, could you screen share just the list of 10, and you have the list of 10 here with you, as well as what was put into the chat online. And so if you're looking at those 10, what you want to do now is you're going to be voting for your top 5 of those 10. So which 5 do you want to push forward to wordsmith more, fill out in a bigger sense, bring more to? And we should turn the lights back on for our in-person folks. If you want to push forward your top 5, what would those top 5 be? Doesn't matter ranking order or anything like that, just what are your top 5? And everybody who's a committee member has stickers. And you can come up here and just put them in the line where they belong for how you feel about moving forward. You got 5 votes. Online, what you want to do is, if you are a subcommittee member only, open the chat function. If you cannot open the chat function, let us know right away. But click on the chat function and just write in your favorite 5 to move forward for recommendations. When you are saying 8 and 9, just put 8 and 9 together.
That is a question.
Matt,
It's me, Matt. We have a couple members from organizations, Middle Peninsula, HRPDC. It's really one vote per organization.
1 vote per organization,
Not the
that's,
scales here.
is that true online at all?
Yes, so Ben, you and Whitney decide who's voting. Kirk, you and Louie can decide, or you can work together to put the roll marshal, all right? Yes. Maybe the phone. a
You
friend.
can call them by phone if you want to.
Pretty much, no. It's also supposed to be another meeting, so it's.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think.
I'm just gonna pause. So, sort of, everyone on the committee saying what their top 5 priorities are. Is that just an indication at this point in time of what the next step is, or where are we going?
We need to get. We're tasked with
Today,
What cap do you find? What cap do you find?
There's gonna be 20 total
Yeah,
for all 4 committees?
What cap do you 20 then?
what we felt was going to be reasonable to put forward. We're not, again, we're not losing them. If it's not in the top 20 in the plan document, we still have every recommendation in the document.
So all the recommendations will be there. It's just that there's going to be 20 that are more discussed in more detail.
Right, and some of these more detailed recommendations can feed into a broader one. And we're not forgetting, especially on top of this. We've heard your input.
And we have until 11:40 to do the voting. So we have about 7 more minutes for voting.
Here it is.
And we, after public comment, we can talk a little bit further again.
So we're gonna get 5.
Yes, we're trying to get 5 today, so we'll see what the results look like. And with the remaining time, there's a tie, you can work through those. If it's all spread out everywhere and there's no clear decision, we will not have any time. The plan is for us to, if they're combined meetings, we would recommend combining. We will.
She just needs to put it up on.
But here, we're trying to see what are our highest priorities. Because we only have. Yeah, just the time to vote, out.
I'm putting the online votes here with the marker. Is there a second online?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's that. We might be thinking about it.
You didn't say, but I was only one vote for, you don't stack your votes.
That's. I don't care, as long as it's something through, all I want to.
Do that, yeah, I could put it to the. Right. Well, here. Okay, I don't think that. Where is that? We don't want to be covered on that, it's specifically that. Well, how do we do? Like about. Well, that would have been the big part. But, yeah, that's, I kind of wanted to.
Trying to figure out how to better my. A little bit of purple bills on this out. And then with.
Yeah.
Or we could.
So right now, Claire, are you able to use the chat? It's okay if you're still thinking. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, just needed a second.
I combine two thoughts here.
Ten and five.
7, 6, 4, 10, 5.
It's a higher response. It's our responsibility here as city members that have been in panel to vote on this, to vote through the lens of what is in the best interest of the Commonwealth, or is it through the lens of the professional capacity that we were invited to come to this group through? Because that does change the perspective on what we're doing.
That's a deep question. Any other committee members want to comment on that?
I mean, I would go, approach this through the lens of the bigger responsibility to the Commonwealth, because that's what I thought, and Kurt had a different opinion on that, so, I mean, good question.
What do you think, Robert?
We have no role. But again, put it back to you, you're voting.
Well, what was the charge? The charge for the individual people,
For being a member of the TAC, to advise the Commonwealth.
so it's the Commonwealth first then.
Yeah, good line.
Size the Commonwealth, but you were asking.
From your perspective.
From your perspective.
Yeah. You can't answer. I mean, I think that's a variety of committee members.
Yeah.
Variety of stakeholders. I think it's advised that's. Not very.
Anyone else not yet voted in the room besides Louis?
We're not losing anything there.
But people generally don't leave, you probably.
That's fair.
And the ones that made it to the top 10 also. Public.
Voted on, how many people participated in voting for the top 10?
Your whole. For this subcommittee, member of each organization.
So that is,
Uh,
I just wondered, because like then, you didn't make the top. It's kind of funny.
And I know at least everybody's top one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Points. So if you voted for something, they got votes. And we did the total points. We looked at different options, we looked at everybody gets their number 1, and then that's our top 10. Or everybody gets their 1, 2, and combine some points.
But did it end up that just naturally, everyone's number one did make it? I don't know.
That's what I'm telling you. Ben voted for the HRPDC and he said, I mean, I had it, like, stop, you do not make.
I didn't make the.
He was voting in one.
Yeah, he did all the voting because I was distracted with some other silly program, you know.
And what you put up in the parking lot is top.
Just like the.
Thing, like the way it's sort of.
We have
Well,
Active.
everyone else. Louis, did you put yours up? You did. Okay, so everyone has voted. Everyone has voted. So we're going to go to public comment.
As of now, there's no one that's expressed an interest for public comment.
Here too.
Going once,
And the bottom of the top.
gone.
That was the one I posted.
Oh, we got 6. So there's nobody.
There's one person and she's not expressed an interest.
Okay.
That's a lot of time.
If we got rid of 3.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
We're all in agreement here.
I think we have 7.
Oh, 1.
We have 1, 6, but then.
5, 6. I mean, we have 5.
Yep.
So the results that we have here, 6 people voted for number 10. You want to screen share again with this, is that possible, the recommendations? Yeah, I can. So, looking at the recommendations, number 10 seems to come out way above the rest. The rest of them are split a bit, so number 1, the following got 4 points or 4 votes. Number 1, number 3, number 4, number 7, and number 6. Sorry, I didn't see you out of order. So those all got 4 votes. And then the other combo of 8 and 9 got 3 votes, number 2 got 3 votes, and number 5 got 3 votes. So right now, that gives you 6 of them. Do you have a opinion that any of those 6 could be combined with another one of those 6?
I think before we try combining, just to note, number 7 was also considered yesterday in outreach and coordination. This is making the case. So I know we worked on rewording here, but that also moved out to the top 5. So it doesn't come out of this subcommittee, it's in another. Just that thought.
And on top of that, for 7, I think 7 is very closely tied to 10, because it's specific to making recommendations for state grant funds. So you're evaluating how grant funds are performing, then making a recommendation on how to make any changes based on what you learn. So could combine 7 and 10, maybe it ends up getting combined with the other subcommittees number. Or
there is a standalone.
Bill has his hand raised.
Bill?
Yeah, I was on the committee yesterday and Matt's right. We felt very strongly about 7. I think that 10 is different than 7. So, I mean, yes, you could fold them together, but I don't want to lose the importance and critical requirement to make the case to the state legislators.
So it sounds like what you could do, because number 7 was chosen yesterday from the ONC Outreach and Coordination Subcommittee, then if you wanted to, you could move your other 5 forward within your subcommittee. And we need to see how some communication around the other number 7 could happen between your subcommittees. Of course, Bill represents them both. So any thoughts about that? That you could say number 7 is important and we're really thankful it's already moving forward with ONC. So therefore, your other top 5 could go forward here for further discussion.
Does that mean that outreach subcommittee that will have it worded?
I think maybe that's one we discussed. Where you're voting.
It would make sense to be able to talk together on it.
We want to vote. I don't think we can motion to vote without putting a motion voting on the agenda. Okay. So this is just informatory, formal voting. Do you want to discuss
These.
any of the other more to see if there's? Do we need any other discussion? What is point? Is there combination, or do we want to discuss priorities of those?
We have about 14 minutes left for the meeting if you'd like to.
When you're looking at, it's not only discussing voting, because voting is voting. But what I do see striking with it is probably a difference of perspective based on how different people sitting on the table engage with the topical area. Everybody that participates in our group is all supporting some type of flood mitigation journey, where we all step in and where we all step out is at a different place, at a different time, different location. And I think you're seeing that play out through the voting process, because things that are important to other communities that maybe further the journey would vote differently than those that are entering the journey or have not entered the journey yet. So we all need to keep that in mind, the perspective of the narrative of how you talk about the voting in that context matters, because everyone that is dealing with the problem is dealing with it from a very different temporal perspective, and how that relates to the tools and the money. Because at the end of the day, the money is probably the single most important thing involved with all of this.
That's your focus on this committee, right? So,
in terms of discussion, like, 8 and 9 is not part of, or it's not in the top 5. I would like to say that the concepts of 8 and 9 can be incorporated in number 1.
okay. So the concepts of 8 and 9 being incorporated in number 1, we talked a little bit about that before. Does anybody have further thought about that? So if we said going forward, when we're describing number 1, you would like to, as a group, incorporate the concepts of 8 and 9 into it in some way, whether it's in the exact language of the recommendation or really in the description of that recommendation.
I think we can talk about that next committee meeting when we're working on final language, whether or not you want to put it such as example underneath.
Well, for I think the guiding principles are supposed to be things that we could like implement and I think we might have thrown out the easy things to implement. And gone with a lot of very vague objectives, so I don't know if that was smart. Like, it's fine to put 8, 9 as a subset of 1, but we could do 8 and 9. Number 1, who knows what we'll do. Does anybody else have any concerns in that front?
Such as you started with.
I did.
You know what I'm saying? That
When I went to Louis, that was my comment, was I highlighted all the ones that we could do and that would create resources to help us do our job better. And only one of those made it in the top 5.
The concept of actionable.
Yes, actionable is what drove my thinking behind this.
To some degree, though, that often makes sense that it would turn out this way, because that's the crossing of scale. So that's why it might make sense to embed these detailed ones under those broader concepts, so that you can kind of about the rural and urban dimension of what are the financial tools and reports that are critical for you moving forward. Could vary by urban and rural, so that's the overarching recommendation with these specific. Well, I'd actually encourage you to think about how they embed and how they nest under the concept.
right, because for me, build on that, number 6, which is about the financial needs of private and public projects. I feel like that kind of captures the rural and urban a little bit too. It's more complicated than that, but it could be under 1.
If 6 is talking about revenue, or 6 talking about expenses, or 6 talking about both revenue and expenses. The perspective of financial needs has not been explained. Are you talking about the need for more revenue coming in, or the need to have money to build?
Well, I part of me feels like we talk about we make math, right? And there is never any clarity about the amount, how much this problem can be dealt with the public. projects on public land versus private. This is really hard to do this quickly, I'll be honest. I don't mind combining, I can't do it as a base.
Yeah.
I just,
I understand.
I'm not
I really do.
capable.
And something else you just brought up, maybe part of the description for every recommendation, you have an urban section and a rural section. Like you could declare as a subcommittee, hey, when these are described, these are the different attributes we need to consider. 'Cause, Louis, you were talking about different aspects of that. All the pieces that get thrown together to make one puzzle, maybe we should talk a little bit about each one related to a recommendation. And recognizing the timing of doing it so quickly. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I'll acknowledge that I think your thing is gonna drive us to generic vague words that lose really important distinctions. Probably, and the value of those distinctions. But what will also be impossible in this group to prioritize those in a fair way, given the representation we have. How to get both. I guess that's both where I was suggesting there's an overarching recommendation, and we've got number and then the sub bullets that's giving it. Yeah.
I'm kind of okay with that, I would just say, I wouldn't make them as examples, I'd say this is like step one. Like, I think that's where sometimes we have things have fallen apart, we had a good next step, and instead, they're all, I mean, that's really specific, so like, let's make it vague so we don't do anything. Not intentional, but that's what we have done literally, right? Yeah, so, but we can change that, right? We could just say, this time around, let's at least do these things. And if we have to get them done fast enough to then ask yourself, what's the second example? That'd be great, but I don't know, it's.
So when,
We can help ourselves.
Okay.
between now and next workshop, what we can do is we'll package this up and be able to provide it to the subcommittee members. So you're seeing what the top 5 ones are. You're also seeing which ones are not included in the top 5. And we are also going to see that, you know, number 7, whatever it is we'll do to be able to have a joint conversation, that will come forth. So being able to provide that to you, then you have those written items. You can decide how you want to think about it in the meantime before the next meeting. And then come to the next meeting with possibly things written in your own language. Or are you allowed to talk with each other in some ways between now and Q4?
Limited.
On a limited basis, right? So in some way, we bring together your thoughts. You have a little bit of time to think about them. How do you want to bring it forth so it becomes a very fleshed out recommendation? And the wording, we want to make sure in Q4 the wording is ideal for you. And then anything else that you can put to it. Does anybody else have suggestions about the path forward, given our timing?
We have the TAC in a month, which will report out where we stand. And see input from the other TAC members to see where they're at.
And you've identified some really good principles of, you know, what needs to happen. You want them to be actionable. Okay. Anything else from our online folks? All right.
Any other subcommittee discussion, new business, anybody wants to bring up? Discuss in the remaining time. If not, just an update on schedule. So the full TAC meeting, September 18th, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at your Henry Building.
Okay.
We've got our next subcommittee meeting, October 10th, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And then the full TAC, November 13th, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at your Henry Building. And then the plan is released end of the year. That's all I have. Anything else? All right. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.